This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of January 23rd, 2023. So this week's podcast, I wanted to talk about over-the-air broadcasting, specifically the question of whether or not we're going to get 4K over-the-air broadcasting this year. And I don't want you to stop listening to the podcast. I'd love it if you would continue, but I do have the answer for you, and the answer is no. No, we're not. But there's still a lot more to the podcast to talk about, and I hope that you'll continue to listen. Before I get into the technical aspects of why this is not going to happen this year, I want to kind of get into why it is that you might have thought that it was going to happen this year. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of it comes from one or two sources, and I have to be super careful. I don't want to get into lawsuit territory, but I do want to kind of explain some things. You're going to read a lot of articles, or you have read a lot of articles in the last 6 months or so about how 4K over-the-air television is coming. And, it very well may come at some point. I'm not saying it won't come at some point. It's just not coming in the next 6 months. A lot of these trace back, like I said, to one or two sources that really don't have a true understanding of what is going on with the world of antennas. And one of those sources is a broadcast company that really, it's in their interests to promote this kind of thing because they're pushing very hard for this to happen. Another company is a web platform with a name that really people kind of trusted in the 90s and early 2000s, and recently, really in the last 10 years, has become a source of a lot of disinformation. As I said, I'm not going to name them because I don't want to get sued, but I think that if you do a little bit of research, you're going to find that it's pretty easy to figure out who I am talking about. Now, if you're going to have 4K over-the-air television, you're going to need a couple of things. First of all, you need a new broadcast standard, and that means that Congress has to be involved because the way that we look at the broadcast spectrum, the radio waves that broadcasts take place on, it is looked at the same way as the national parks. It's sort of a national treasure, something that the entire country gets to enjoy. And if you're going to make any changes to it, they have to be made on a national level by law. So right there, that should tell you that it's not going to happen in the next 6 months because nothing in Congress ever happens within about 6 months. Second of all, when we're talking about the legal aspects of it, another thing that you need to know is that the FCC would need to do a lot of work here. And the FCC has been stuck for really 2 years without all the people that it needs to do the work, which is frustrating. I certainly say it is very frustrating. More to the point, we may finally see a commissioner nominated to and approved to go on the FCC in the next 6 months, but then they have a lot of work to do catching up for the next 2 years. Another thing that everybody is going to be looking at, and really nobody is seeing at this point, is whether or not you have the ability to get these broadcasts at a reasonable price. Your regular TV isn't going to get them. About 10% of the TVs out there will actually receive these broadcasts, possibly less. I think the answer is actually 10% of TVs made recently. So if you've got a TV made more than 3 or 4 years ago, honestly, that means there's a 0% chance you're going to get these broadcasts without having to buy an extra piece of hardware. And what of that extra piece of hardware? Well, you can buy, there are a few of them that you can buy, and they're not cheap. There really isn't one that is just kind of hooks up to the TV and just works. There are some that are close, but really that kind of infrastructure isn't there yet. The hope is that we're going to start seeing these things be inexpensive in the next year or so, but that's not going to happen in the next 6 months. If it were going to happen in the next 6 months, what you would have seen would have been something at the recent CES show that looked like it was going to be available in the next 6 months. It takes, honestly, years for these kind of things to be developed, and I just don't see it happening. And I hate to be the kind of guy who bursts the bubble here, but I think that you deserve the honest answer as to all of this stuff. And So let's get into the heart of it too, which is, when we look at 4K broadcasting, is it going to be any different from what you already have? A lot is being made, for example, of Fox broadcasting certain football games in 4K, but they're actually not recording them in 4K. They're just recording them in HD and sampling them up to 4K, which gives you decent quality, I'll give you that. But it's not the same quality as if they were actually recording it in 4K. And even when we were looking at, some of the 4K Olympics footage, it just didn't have that kind of sparkling quality that we would normally associate with 4K because it was compressed down to work in broadcast and to take as little space as possible. And, we still are seeing where streaming platforms don't deliver 4K in the same level of quality that you can get from playing a file locally from a 4K Ultra HD disc, for example. And when we look at 4K content that's, created, it's just not, it's not where it could be yet. Now, when you broadcast it, when we finally get to the point where we can broadcast things in 4K, it's going to have to be compressed so much that it fits into one regular TV channel. And remember, the idea for these TV channels was originally that they would fit one standard definition broadcast, which is roughly 1/8 of the amount of information that you're going to get from a 4K broadcast. Actually less, but there's a lot of fancy math involved. So I'm just going to go with 1/8. And so they have to really compress that signal down in order to make sure that it fits in that channel. Now, we've got some fancy math now, and we can do a lot, but you're going to lose something if you take 7/8 of the picture information away. No matter how efficiently you compress it, you're going to lose something. Anyway, so when we see a lot of articles, when we see a lot of other places talking about 4K, why are they so excited about it? Why is it that we are seeing that excitement? Now, it's because when you talk about the one company that has all this money invested in 4K, it's because they really want to give you something for your money, but they don't want to give it to you for free. The lure of a next generation broadcast platform is the ability to serve you more ads that you cannot skip. And these companies believe that if they do this, if they serve you these ads, that you're going to stay around and just watch them instead of moving over to another medium like streaming, which has fewer ads and sometimes skippable ads. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you, but there's a company out there that thinks this is actually going to work. And this is why they have spent probably hundreds of millions of dollars getting this done. But I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think it will eventually happen. I just don't know when. The original goal for all of this transition to take place was around mid-25, and I think we're going to miss that. I don't think we're going to be anywhere near that. I think that you have to kind of look 5 years out at this point. So even if a decision were made today, it would be early 28 before anything would happen. You'd have more broadcasts, you'd have the ability to use this stuff temporarily, but it would be like, if you remember 20 years ago, that there was a time period you could have HD, and at the same time you could have the standard definition, and then there was a cutoff point. You couldn't have standard definition analog broadcasts after that. It's going to be like that. There will be a transition period, and that transition period is already going on, but I just have to say that kind of the heavy duty adoption of it is still a while away. But I look forward to it, and here's why I look forward to it. I look forward to it for our RV and marine customers, because you see, back in the 90s when they were designing digital television, it just wasn't possible to have streaming digital video that worked when you were in motion. Now, we do this all the time on our phones. It's just we take it for granted. But back then it was quite a trick to do it. And that meant that when digital television came in, that if you had an RV or a boat, that you weren't going to get TV if you were going more than about 15 miles an hour. And that's kind of a shame too, because there's a lot of great stuff that you could be watching while in motion, or at least as long as you're not driving or piloting the boat. And you lost access to that. So the new standard will bring this back. It's really not that hard to do in 2023. It was hard to do in 1996, but it's not hard to do in 2023. And eventually, when it happens, well, people are going to have that ability back in their RVs. Will they be as excited about it? I don't know, because we've all been streaming for a very long time. But hey, one thing at a time, right? So anyway, that's the story. As I said, you're going to run into a lot of people who will want to tell you that there will be this huge, massive push for 4K over-the-air television this year. And as much as I would love to see it, it's not going to happen. But here's the good news. If you buy an over-the-air television antenna today from solidsignal.com, it's going to work for 4K and for the next generation of televisions. There should be absolutely no reason why not. So it shouldn't hold you up from buying an antenna now and enjoying the stuff that you can enjoy, at least not going 15 miles an hour, but enjoying what you can be enjoying now, all the free television that you can. And then when that 4K television finally does roll in, you'll have the antenna and it's going to work for you, which is great news. So like I said, go to solidsignal.com, pick yourself up an over-the-air antenna, kind of try it out, see if it works for you now. It's an inexpensive way to get a lot of free content. You pay once and there's nothing more to pay ever, and it works great. Go to solidsignal.com, as I said, or if you want a professional recommendation, call 888-233-7563. That's the phone number. And the folks at Solid Signal do actually pick up the phone during East Coast business hours. It's not like a lot of web-based businesses. They pick up the phone and they are willing and happy to help. That's about it for the Solid Signal podcast. Please, as I always say, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Always makes me look good to my boss. Thanks once again for listening, and I will be back next week with even more fun and games.